Welcome to the Media Pros Show, the show that gives you quick, simple tips to grow your business by serving as an expert in the media. Learn how to get all the TV, radio, podcast, magazine, newspaper, and online interviews and media appearances that you want, and learn how to be great in those interviews. I'm Dr. David Geyer, orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and media medical expert. Way back in episode 4, I did a show discussing why podcasts can be great for growing your business. Not just hosting a podcast, but being a guest, being interviewed on podcasts. And if you didn't hear that episode, go back and listen to it. There was a lot of good reasons, but 2 that I'll remind you of. 1, 90 million people in this country listen to at least one podcast episode every month. That's a huge potential audience. And second, there are an almost infinite number of podcast niches. Every field, industry, topic you can possibly imagine, with listeners passionate about that topic, about your topic. Now, later this month, I'm going to drop a bonus episode for this show where I interview Dr. Brent Lacey. He hosts a very successful physician podcast, and almost every week he interviews physicians and other people on his show. And we talk about a lot of things related to podcasts. But one of the things I discuss with him, I ask him what he's found that makes somebody a great podcast guest. So pay attention for that coming out later this month. But for this episode, I want to share a few things that I've learned, a few tips for you that can help you be a great podcast guest and hopefully get more contacts, more leads, and hopefully more business. So here are just a few. I'm not going to say you should do just a few. I would try to do every single one of these, focus on every one of these before your next podcast interview. First, listen to a few episodes of the podcast you're going to be appearing on. Is the discussion fun and lighthearted, or is it serious? Is the discussion between the host and the guest really quick, back and forth interactions, or does the guest get long periods of time to give long explanations and long answers to questions? Knowing the nature of the show can help you adjust your message, your talking points, your tone and demeanor to fit that show and really fit in with the audience and with the host of that show. Second, you want to use the best possible equipment for your interview. Now, when I say the best equipment, very often the podcast host or maybe the producer is going to send you a list of instructions. It may be, hey, we're doing the interview on Zoom or on Skype or some software like Remotely, something like that, how to access the interview and get on it. But he or she probably will also say, hey, you need this, and this technical specifications. It may be a certain type of browser or a number of other things. But at a bare minimum, here are 2 types of equipment you absolutely need, regardless of what podcast interview you're going to do and what the technical specifications the host suggests to you. First, you need an external microphone. It can be a simple mic that plugs into the USB connection on your computer. It can be a fancy one like my boom mic here that goes through a preamp into my computer. It can be anything, but you do not want to use your computer, your laptop's built-in microphone. It'll sound like you're talking into a tin can, and bad audio is very distracting for the listener. Another piece of equipment you need to at least consider are using headphones or earbuds or AirPods, something like that, to hear the questions of the host. One of the problems with using your computer's built-in speakers is that depending on the audio and what the software that's being used to record it, you might get a little bit of echo where the question that the host asks and then it coming back from your speakers back into your mic, there may be a little bit of an echo, and that delay can be really distracting. So consider using, external headphones, wired or even wireless, AirPods, something like that. And don't worry that you're going to look funny. Almost all podcasts are audio. They don't post the video. So that's something to think about. Now, as we get into more content, one thing that's critically important is that you appeal to a specific type, your ideal customer, client, or patient, or better known as your avatar. And hopefully you chose a podcast and pitched a podcast that the audience is made up of your ideal clients or customers or patients. But you want to appeal directly to that person. So maybe it's a newlywed couple looking to buy their first home if you're a real estate agent. Maybe it's a woman in her 40s who just got divorced if you're a divorce or family attorney. Maybe it's somebody who just likes to run or lift weights if you're a physical therapist or chiropractor or personal trainer. I know people that will actually go online and find a photo of someone that looks like their ideal avatar, their ideal customer or patient. And then they'll actually tape that photo to the front of their computer or maybe post it behind their computer and look at it and talk directly to that person. Answer their questions in ways that focus specifically on the interests and the needs and the wants of that avatar, that ideal client. That can be very, very helpful. Another great thing about podcasts is that they're long, so you can tell stories. That's our next tip. Some podcast interviews are going to be, be for a long time, 20 minutes to, several hours. So you have plenty of time to fill that with your answers. And yeah, it can be helpful to give facts and statistics about the problem you're talking about. But stories are really helpful. People love stories. People remember stories. They could be stories about an ideal client or patient that you had that overcame a specific problem. Success stories related to that problem. Problems that the listener actually has. Stories are so persuasive, and they're far more likely to get the listener to take action on whatever it is that you do more than facts and statistics. So whenever you can, tell stories. Another kind of little thing, but it can really help, is when you're in that podcast episode, make your information, make your message timeless. And by that I mean, try to avoid references to current events or things in the news that happened on a specific day. You have to remember that a lot of times people find this podcast, find your episode, your interview on that podcast, and listen to it months or even years after it dropped. So if you reference something years ago, that listener may have no idea what you're talking about, and it just sounds really weird. They may not remember it, or it may just date you. Just try to avoid anything that basically tells the listener exactly when this interview was recorded, unless it's a podcast about a breaking news subject or something like that. But most podcasts, when you're doing things that experts talk about, is not that way. Attorneys, physicians, financial planners, accountants, real estate agents, it's not current events related. So try to avoid that to make the episode timeless. You want to be open to talking about yourself and explaining why a particular topic matters to you. Telling a story of why this issue is such a big deal, how you got interested in it, and why you're so passionate about overcoming it. Listeners absolutely love that. They resonate with it. Maybe it's you became a real estate agent because you struggled to get a loan to buy your first home, or maybe you decided to become an oncologist after medical school because your sister died of cancer. Whatever it is, be open to explain why something matters to you. It gets the listener to be empathetic with you, and if they have that particular problem, they'll be more likely to choose you to help them to solve it. And speaking of being open, don't be afraid to answer personal questions. Now, most podcast hosts aren't going to ask you about your personal life, for the most part, but I've been asked some of the most off-the-wall questions. And again, remember, I'm an orthopedic surgeon doing sports medicine, but I've been asked what's my favorite breakfast cereal. I've been asked what my favorite cartoon was growing up. What are some of the funniest things that patients have either said or done. I've even been asked that if I could have a walk-up song, the song that they play at baseball games as the batter walks up to the plate. If I could have a walk-up song, what would it be? Have fun if you're asked questions like this. Be human. Be someone that the listener would actually like. That can be really, really helpful. Also, answer the questions that you're actually asked. I know you've got a message and you're trying to build your business and get more customers, clients, and patients. But a lot of times in an interview, the host won't necessarily follow the script of questions. Even if there is a script, he or she may go down a tangent, sort of following up on something you said. But a lot of guests are so stuck on hammering a certain message and delivering certain talking points that they don't really answer the questions asked. It makes a really, really awkward interview. So just be in the moment and answer the questions that you're actually asked. Along those lines, another important point is to make the host look good and sound good. This is their show. This is his or her audience. Your job, or at least one of your jobs, needs to be to make that host look amazing and sound amazing. So laugh at a joke, share a compliment, engage in the friendly banter, but make it, good for not just you, but good for the host. I can promise you that if you make the host look and sound good, you will look good in return. As you get close to the end of the interview, you want to have a call to action that encourages the listener to connect with you and get to know you a little bit better, to work with you a little bit more. Now, on most podcasts, you can't just outright sell products and services. I mean, there may be some that you can, so listen to a few episodes and see if previous guests sold something directly at the end of the show. But most of the time, you'll be given, almost all the time really, you'll be given a chance to say, hey, how can people work with you more or find out more about you? And this is your opportunity to really connect with that listener and potentially bring them in as a lead or potential customer, client, or patient. So offer something for free. Maybe it's a free ebook or access to a podcast series about the issue or the topic that you talked about on that show, where they have to go to your website and they get it for free by giving you their email address. Or maybe you give a discount code on products or services you sell on your website. It could even be as simple as giving a link to your website, or you mention your social media accounts, but you really want to focus on getting email addresses, because that's really going to be the best way to connect with those people in the future, share further content with them, and maybe pitch your products or services. So have a good call to action. You want to be enthusiastic and energetic. Again, these podcasts can be long, anywhere from 20 minutes to 2, 3, 4 hours sometimes. Some of the podcasts I listen to, the episodes will have interviews that are 2 hours or more. So don't be boring. If you're boring, I promise you're going to lose the listeners. So again, passionate, explain why a topic matters to you, but smile as you're talking, have fun. The more passionate and engaging and enthusiastic you are about your topic and about that issue, the more the listeners are going to care about it and potentially select you. And last, the interview's done. Now you want to share that podcast episode, share that interview. So ask the host if he or she knows when it's going to drop, find out when that is. And if you don't know, at least set up a Google alert for your name so that when Google sees that episode, sees that interview, you're alerted to it. Get the link to that podcast episode and share it with your email list, who are your current customers, clients, and patients, but also share it on social media, all your social media accounts. Podcast hosts work really hard, not just creating the podcast generally, but every day or every week or every month, however often they do the show, they put a lot of work into creating that content. So really do them a favor and try to drive your audience to them. It gets them more listeners for that particular episode, but hopefully some of those people subscribe to it and they get more listeners on a regular basis. I promise you, if you do that, not only will they be appreciative, but they'll be more likely to have you on that show down the road over and over again. A number of the podcasts that I've been on, I've done it many, many times. So that's something that can be really, really helpful. Again, try to focus on all those tips. Every one of those is important. Just think about them before you go on your next podcast interview, your next podcast episode. One of the things I do with the clients I work with one-on-one is that you and I find a podcast or a few podcasts that would be great for growing your business. Then we figure out the best pitch to try to get an interview on that podcast or those podcasts. And then once you land the interview, or hopefully multiple interviews, we work on how you can be great in those interviews so you can get more customers, clients, and patients. Remember, on this podcast, on this show, on my website, and my coaching, this is not specific advice. It's not specific business, financial, medical, legal, any kind of advice like that. If you have specific concerns for your business, please talk to an expert in that field. But if you want to try to get more patients, more customers and clients by doing more media interviews, hopefully become the expert in your industry, in your town, I can help you become a media pro. Go to MediaProsCoaching.com. At the very top of the page and multiple places on the page, you can click to get a free 30-minute strategy call with me where we look at your business and what you're trying to achieve. And then we identify just a few quick, simple things that you can implement right away to start doing media interviews in your town. While you're there, get your free copy of the Media Pros interview checklist. Several pages, it's like 20 or 30 tips like these for podcasts, but simple tips that can help you be great in your next interview, whatever the media, so that you get asked back over and over again. And that's one of the keys with media is repetition. So that checklist can be extremely helpful for you. That's it for this week. I'll see you again next week. Remember, as legendary UCLA basketball coach John Wooden, who won 10 national championships in 12 years, he always said, make each day your masterpiece.